also known as Yud Tet Kislev, Hilula of great Rabbi Dov Ber ben Avram of Mezeritch, very great rabbi, also popularly known as the Maggid of Mezeritch, respectively, over there. He was the Talmid of the famous Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yisrael ben Eliezer, let's say the founder of Hasidic Judaism, and was chosen as his successor to lead the early movement in of itself. So he passed away on the 4th of December in the year 1772. And let's speak a bit about him. Rabbi Dov Ber is regarded as the first, systematic exponent of the mystical philosophy underlying the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, the great rabbi, and through his teachings, leadership, the main architect of this, Chassidut movement in of itself. He established his base in an area called Mezritch, I believe, in Volhynia, which would move, the center of Hasidim from Medzibish, and that was in Podolia, where he focused his attention on raising, a close circle of students to spread the movement. After he passed away, the third generation of leadership took their different interpretations and would go across appointed regions of Europe, rapidly spreading Chassidut beyond Ukraine to Poland, Galicia, and Russia, also respectively. Very, very interesting enough. Also, I think his teachings appear in the Maggid of Yaakov, the Or Torah, the Likutim Yekarim, the Or Ha'emet, the Kitvei Kodesh, the Shemua Tova, and in works authored by his students in himself. His inner circle of disciples were known as the Chavra Kedisha, the Holy Brotherhood. They would include famous rabbis, including Rabbi Abraham Hamalach, who was his son, Nachum of Kertzerbol, I think he was a famous Ukrainian rabbi, Rabbi Elimelech of Lezehensk, Rabbi Zush of Hanipol, also he passed away in the year 1880, interesting enough. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichov, another great rabbi, passed away in 1809. Rabbi Baruch of Mezeritch, he passed away in 1811. He was a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. Rabbi Aaron Hagadol of Karlin, he was another one of the famous rabbis in the Chassidut movement. Earlier rabbis, respectively, Rabbi Chaim Sheikel of Amdur was another great rabbi. I think he was found in 1773 the Amdur Hasidic dynasty in Indura. Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, he passed away in 1788. Rabbi Shmuel Shmelk of Nikolsburg, I believe, another famous rabbi. Rabbi Shlomo Flam, who was known as the Lutzker Maggid, if I'm not mistaken. Rabbi Asher Zebi of Ostroa, I think he was in the 19th century. He was an Abbedin of Koretz, also respectively. We had to point out also another famous rabbi, Rabbi Zev Wolf of Zitma, and Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, another great rabbi, the Baal Hatanya, we've spoken about on various occasions before. Okay, so his name. The most common translations are Dov Ber, or Dov Ba'ir, or Dov Ber. Rarely used forms are Dov Ber, for example, or Dov Ber in of itself, which often depend on the region in Eastern Europe where the Jewish person, had lived, and hence the influence of, I think there was dialects in Yiddish at that point in time. So I think the name Dov Ber itself is traceable back to the Hebrew Dov. Literally a bear, and the Yiddish Be'er, let's just say, in itself, is also there. So it's thus, an example of a bilingual tautological name in of itself. Now, Rabbi Dov Ber of Mezeritch was known as a Maggid, a preacher, a sayer in of its own right, one who preaches and, tells people to go in God's ways. Mezeritch is a German form of Mezeritz. It's sometimes used, instead of Mezeritch. And towards the end before he passed away, to end of his life, he was known as Maggid of Rivna also, which is the town where he was buried. Very interesting enough. Anyone tuning in live, we're exploring the history here on Yud Tet Kislev of the famous rabbi, the Maggid of Mezeritch over here. So please, if you haven't subscribed yet to our channel and our community, please subscribe now. And so Rabbi Dov Ber was born in Lokachi. In the year, there's differing opinions when he was actually born. According to one opinion, I believe it was in 1704. Somewhere else says it was in 1710, which was according, I believe, to Jewish Encyclopedia, if I'm not mistaken. But Beatas May, yeah, it was definitely in the very earlier parts of the 1700s, respectively, where he was actually born in. So that's something I would definitely point out over here. And some sources will even say it was in the year 1700. So little is known about him before he became a Talmid of the famous Baal Shem Tov. Remember, the Baal Shem Tov was a great rabbi of his time. That's for another class. I think we did record a video, if I'm not mistaken, about the famous Baal Shem Tov. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was maybe, I think it was about 3 or 4 months ago. It was at the time period of his Hilula, respectively. So he was, the Hasidic legend states that when he was 5 years old, his family home burst into flames. And on hearing his mother weeping, he asked, "Mother, do we have to be so unhappy because we have lost our house?" So she replied that she was mourning the family tree, which was destroyed and is traced to King David by way of Rabbi Yochanan, the sandal maker, and the master in the Talmud. So the boy at the time replied, "And what does that matter? I should get you a new family tree, which begins with me." So very, very interesting. A source of comfort already, you could say, at a very, very early stage that would be. When he was young, he reportedly lived in, unfortunately, there was poverty, money troubles with his wife. One legend relates that when a child was born, they had no money to pay the midwife. His wife complained, and the Maggid went outside at that point in time. He went outside and said, "O children of Israel, may abundant blessing come upon you." And when his wife complained a second time, he went outside again and said, "Let all happiness come to the children of Israel, but they shall give their money to thorn bushes and stones." And reports over here, just using Wikipedia source, the baby was too weak to cry. And the Maggid sighed rather than, let's say, giving other exclamations. Immediately the answer will come, and a voice said, "You have lost your share in the coming world." The Maggid replied, "Well then, the reward has been done away with. Now I can begin to serve in good earnest." Okay, I think he was buried in Hanipol, in Zusha of Hanipol, respectively. Over there, that's a place I believe that he was actually buried. Interesting enough. So let's speak about his visit to the Baal Shem Tov. Also, anyone tuning in live, welcome at the moment to our community as we explore a bit of the history within regards to the famous Maggid of Mezeritch, really, really great rabbi of his time. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to the channel. And we've got fantastic content in its own right. Okay, so I think the visit to Baal Shem Tov, I think Rabbi Dober was originally a student of the Pnei Yeshua. Later he'll become an admirer of Rabbi Isaac Luria's system of Kabbalah. It was a great rabbi, Rabbi Isaac Ben Solomon Ashkenazi, great rabbi, which was becoming, I think at that point in time, that window of time, it was starting to become more popular. That's something that we definitely have to point out over there. I think he was aware of Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, whose writings, and only in manuscript, were well known among especially Polish mystics of that period. Rabbi Dober followed the Lurian school, living the life of an ascetic, fasting a great deal, praying intensively, and living, let's just say, in poverty in of itself. He is reported over had become crippled as a result of a poor nourishment, which is chronicled over here. I'm not sure the citation. Wikipedia does actually source this, if I'm not mistaken, over here. So one account has it that on account of his poor health, he was persuaded to seek out the Baal Shem Tov for a cure. He arrived at the Baal Shem Tov's house, if I'm not mistaken, and expecting to hear expositions of profound mysteries, but instead was told stories of the latter's everyday's life. It's reported over, which is very, very interesting to just point out here. And but instead was told stories of latter's life. Hearing only similar stories at each subsequent visit, Rabbi Dober decided to return home. Just as he was about to leave, he was summoned again to the Baal Shem Tov, famous rabbi. And the Baal Shem Tov opened an Etz Chaim, book of famous Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was a Talmid of Rabbi Isaac Luria, and asked him to explain a certain passage. Rabbi Dober did so to the best of his ability, but the Baal Shem Tov declared that he had not understood the real meaning of the passage. And Rabbi Dober reviewed it once more and insisted that his interpretation was correct. The Baal Shem Tov then proceeded to explain the passage himself. I think there's a legend that says, as he spoke the darkness suddenly gave way to light, and angels appeared and listened to Baal Shem Tov's word. Your explanations, he said to Rabbi Dober, were correct, but your deductions were thoughts without any soul in them. The experience would over here persuade Rabbi Dober to stay with the famous Baal Shem Tov at that stage in time. That is something we have to point out. Now, Rabbi Dober is reported to have learned from the Baal Shem Tov to value everyday things and events and to emphasize a proper attitude with which to study Torah. The mystical philosophy of the great Baal Shem Tov, let's say, rejected the emphasis on mortification of the body in Musar and in the Kabbalistic traditions, seeing the greater spiritual advantage in transforming the material into a place, a medium for holiness, rather than breaking it. I think this could be achieved also by the perception of the omnipresence and divine immanence in all things, from understanding the inner mystical Torah teachings of Hasidut thought. And under the flagship, let's say, of the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Dober abandoned his ascetic lifestyle. He would recover his health, though I think his left foot, reported over, would remain lame. And the Baal Shem Tov said that before Rabbi Dober came to me, he was already a pure golden menorah. All I needed to do was ignite it. Regarding his holiness, the famous Baal Shem Tov also reputedly said that if Rabbi Dober had not been lame and had been able to richly immerse in the mikveh, then he could have been able to bring the Mashiach. That's how great he actually was over here. Very, very interesting. Let's talk about his leadership, let's just say, in the Hasidut realm in itself. I think it's definitely very much noteworthy to actually speak about this here in this special edition over here. Anyone tuning in live, welcome to our community over here as we're exploring the history of the famous Maggid of Mezeritch, one of the great rabbis in Jewish history, especially in recent times, and always a pleasure to speak about great rabbanim over here in our community. So please, everyone, if you haven't subscribed yet, please share and please subscribe also to the channel and learn more and educate, and let's see some more insights within regards to the great rabbi. Okay, so Hasidic leadership. Immediately after the passing of the Baal Shem Tov, this was in the year 1760, his son Rabbi Tzvi became the next rabbi. After only 1 year, he gave up this position. Among the disciples of the Baal Shem Tovs, two stood out as contenders, Rabbi Dober and Rabbi Yaakov Yosef of Polon. Rabbi Yaakov Yosef would later become the author of the first Hasidut book published, I think, in Toldot Yaakov Yosef in 1780. One of the most, let's say, direct records of the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. By collective consent, the Maggid assumed the leadership of Hasidut. In effect, he became the architect of the Hasidut movement and is responsible for, let's say, successful dissemination of its own right. Now, the Maggid was housebound because, obviously, unfortunately, had a poorish physical condition. I think there was a Jewish philosopher, someone named Rabbi Solomon Maimon. Actually, he was a philosopher born of Lithuanian Jewish parentage in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, if I'm not mistaken. So something to point out in regards to him. I think he actually wrote his book, if I'm not mistaken, in German. If I'm not mistaken, it could be. We mentioned him in a previous video. He himself passed away, I think, in the year 1800. Rabbi Maimon did. So he actually says, he records an encounter with the Maggid, and let's just say he, in his memoirs, in which he passes, let's say, a comment on the Hasidic movement in itself. So that's something I just point out over there. But the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid of Mezeritch, would attract a remarkable group of scholarly and saintly disciples. Most of his fellow students of the Baal Shem Tov traveled various areas in the Jewish world, reaching out, inspiring the common folk. Let's just say the sincerity in of itself he cherished. He sought to revive broken spirits of simple Jews. He would also seek out the great scholars, let's just say, of Talmud and Kabbalah to win them over to Hasidut, and would teach over the inner meanings of his teachings. Many Hasidut tales, I think, relate to the stories of Baal Shem Tov's travels, for example, accompanied by various students and led by his non-Jewish wagon driver. And Rabbi Dober, in contrast, set up his court in Mezeritch, and because obviously he had difficulties, physical lamenesses would restrict him. He was devoted in his main focus to articulating the systematic and the mystical philosophical system of the Baal Shem Tov's teachings to various close disciples who would lead the future movement. The simple folk, let's say, were able to visit during the Shabbat public attendance of Rabbi Dober and receive spiritual encouragement and comfort. The Maggid's court, let's say, became the spiritual seat and place of pilgrimage of the second generation of the Hasidut movement, and moved its center north from Baal Shem Tov's residence in Mezeritch. This move benefits the growth of the movement as it was closer to territories of Galicia, Poland, Belarus, and nearer to the rabbinic opposition in Lithuania, let's say, who may have seen it as a spiritual threat in of itself. The elite group of disciples, as we said before, Rabbi Aaron Karelin, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, Rabbi Levi Yitzchok Berdichov, Rabbi Eli Melech of Lezinsk, Rabbi Zush of Hanipol, the Shmelka, who was later on the chief rabbi of Nikolsburg, Rabbi Pinchas Horowitz, and Rabbi Shmuel Zalman Liadi, let's just say really great rabbis. And he was the author of the Tanya, the latter was, and by instructions of Master, the author of an updated version of the Code of Jewish Law for the new moment. These disciples became, let's say, themselves great Talmudic authorities, very well versed in Kabbalah and Hasidic philosophy, and was successful in turning Hasidut into a vast movement in itself. That's something also we have to point out. Now, who would have the Maggid? Now, let's speak a bit about their published writings. He left no writings of his own. Many of his teachings were recorded by Talmidim and appeared in anthologies. Maggid de Bar Liakov, if I'm not mistaken, last letter spelling the name Dov, known as under the title Likutei Amarim, Collected Sayings. It was published in Koretz in 1780. A second edition in 1784, and frequently reprinted, let's say, in its own right. For example, Lemberg in 1792, or Torah, published in Koretz in 1804. The Or HaEmet, published in Husiatin in 1899. The Kitvei Kodesh in Lemberg in 1862. The Shumwa Tova, a small collection, was published in Warsaw in 1938. And various teachings, I think, in the National Library of Hebrew University can be found over there. There's a great deal, let's say, of overlapping of all the texts, but each contains teachings that do not appear in the others. Work and editing was done, I think, on them, and the Maggid of Rabbi Yaakov was edited by Rabbi Avram Yitzchak Cohen in the year 1961 in Jerusalem. And I think various different, very interesting enough. Now, for the Maggid, Hashem, God, manifests himself in creation, which is only one aspect of activity, and which is therefore, let's just say, in reality, a safe limitation, just as God, in his goodness, limited himself and thus descended to the level of the world. A man, so it's a duty of the latter to strive to unite God, the removal of the outer shell of the mundane things, of a session of the divine spark, being a recognition of the presence of God in all earthly things. It is duty of man, should he experience pleasure, to receive it as a divine manifestation, for God is the source of all pleasure, let's just say, its own right. So anyone tuning in live at the moment, we're a community here. We are learning about famous rabbis of yesteryear over here. It happens to be, let's just say, the Hilula here, or the Maggid of Mezeritch, really, really great rabbi of his time. So please, anyone, if you are live and you're joining here at the moment, welcome to our channel and our community over here, as we are exploring the history of the Maggid of Mezeritch. So that's something that I have to point out over here. So definitely welcome, and sit back and enjoy as we say over a few more words within regards to him. Now, I think Rabbi Dober's view of Tefillah was that its purpose of the life on earth to advance until a perfect union with God is attained. And thus the vegetable kingdom serves as God for the animal kingdom. Like the Neoplatonists, he said that when a man becomes so absorbed into the contemplation of an object that his whole power of thought is concentrated on one point, his self becomes unified with that point. So the tefillah, in such a state of real ecstasy, affecting a union between God and man, is extremely important. We can talk about the role of a tzaddik. Rabbi Dobber taught that only the tzaddik is able to remove all his thoughts from earthly things and concentrate competently on God. Because of his union with God, there is connecting link between God and creation, and thus channeling his blessing and mercy. And the love that man has for the tzaddik provides a path for God. The duty of the ordinary mortal is therefore to love the righteous, be a student of his, and in this connection, Hasidut cite the classical Jewish teaching. The scripture considers one who serves Torah scholars to be cleaving onto Almighty himself. So very interesting. I think this was just a short synopsis of what we can say over here within regards to famous Rabbi Dobber of Mezeritch, happens to be 19th of Kislev. His Hilula over here, so it's a key date. Let's just say Yud Tet Kislev happens to be in the Hebrew calendar, respectively. So that's something very, very important, I thought, to point out. And I think it was important that we record this video over here. And here, being on this specific date in its own right. And if you feel anyone is going to be interested in watching this video, please share this video also to other people. That's something that I would definitely very much point out to all of you fantastic people out there watching. As we're a community here, and we like to explore the history with regards to great rabbis of yesteryear, especially at a time period when it marks the Rabbi's Hilula over here, just like Yud Tet Kislev. And a lot is going on over here in this state in Israel, especially the celebrations on this specific date. Is something that we have to point out. Also, which is very, very important, I feel, friends, over here. So, yeah, very, very interesting. Now, if anyone you haven't subscribed yet to our channel, please subscribe to the community. As, for example, for the biography videos of great rabbis of yesteryear, we phenomenally already recorded about close to 1,400 great rabbanim of yesteryear, and hopefully it's going to grow more and more in the coming months, or years, you could even say. Let's hope so. And very important to speak about it and to learn about it and to educate the next generation with regards to famous rabbis of yesteryear. So Maggid of Mezeritch, let's say, was a key rabbi without doubt. That's something that I would definitely point out, and one that really, really did make his mark, to say, on world Jewry and observant. Right now, we record other videos also on this series of it as a community. This is something that we very much pride ourselves on. We're very fortunate enough here on this channel that we can record with an interesting Jewish personality every day at the moment, where they will give us a burst of wisdom for the 21st century reader, which I think is very beneficial and very, very much needed. And we have that every single day. Thankfully enough, 1 to 3 minutes in general idea on the Torah portion or something else Torah related or Israel related. That's something that we do also. So anyone, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to the channel, and take care and have a great day and meaningfulness. Take care. Thanks for watching.